On behalf of the people of our state, the Republican legislature and the Arizona Freedom Caucus will oppose Katie Hobbs' woke agenda. You can bet your ass that will happen.
So much for bipartisanship. That was far-right State Senator Jake Hoffman serving notice to Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs that his band of Freedom Caucus Republicans will stand in her way. A lawsuit, Hoffman claims, is already in the works to block Hobbs' order banning discrimination in state hiring. So will the first week of divided government in 15 years set the tone for this legislative session? Joining us with their insights are Stacey Pearson, co-founder of the Democratic consulting firm Lumen Strategies, and Republican Paul Bentz, senior vice president and the polling guy at High Ground Consulting. Welcome back to Square Off. I do want to pick up our water discussion in the last segment and look at the politics of this. Paul, with your deep knowledge of the legislature, yours too, Stacey, which legislators or special interests have been roadblocks to agreements that would help the state really manage its groundwater better?
Well, certainly there's been a lot of efforts over the last few years to try to bring additional management tools, particularly to rural Arizona, where groundwater is not measured. We talk about Buckeye, I know we talked about some of those other areas, but throughout the non-active management areas throughout the state, there's no limitations. It has been called the Wild West, no rules. And we see foreign entities coming in and pumping groundwater. In fact, it's one of the only lines in Governor Hobbs' speech that got a round of applause from many Republicans, is stopping Saudi Arabia and others from pumping water. But that being said, there's certainly the development community, the real estate community, and others who have certainly stood in the way, and also the ranching community that have really tried to put the brakes on things the last few years.
And Gail Griffin is a name we often hear when it comes to standing in the way, and she represents rural interests, maybe not in their best interest. What's your take on that?
My take is the budget has been the biggest impediment to infrastructure improvements that would help secure or stabilize our water supplies. And so when we're cutting corporate taxes repeatedly, or we continue to cut taxes on nonsense like corporate jet fuel, when we have a serious water problem, it's absurd.
All right. To be continued. We'll be following that right. through this session. Let's talk about the opening week of the session. What did we learn about how the Democratic governor and Republican-controlled legislature will get along?
Oh, that's a great question. I think we're going to see a preschool playground to some degree. But ultimately, what we saw from the governor was leadership. We're talking about a paid family leave policy that I just can't wrap my brain around some of the antics that were happening on the floor. What are the Republicans protesting? That she's giving 12 weeks of paid time off to state workers who have a baby? Like, I'm confused by what their preschool display was.
I'm sure most folks didn't see it, but what we saw on the floor, and I've been to about 15 of these, was Republicans sitting on their hands the whole time, did not really acknowledge the governor entering. Couples stood with their backs to the governor, then a bunch walked out when she talked about reproductive rights. Kind of different from what we've seen in the past. What is your sense of the strategy the Republicans might be using, on their side to move their agenda and perhaps put Governor Hobbs on the spot?
To extend the preschool analogy, it's like the first day of preschool. We have 41 new legislators, and we have a new governor with putting together her administration. This is going to be a feeling out process for a while here, and we certainly see these grandiose displays. I don't think they're doing themselves any favors if they want to get things done. With a 31 Republican, one vote Republican advantage in both chambers, and them also saying that they're not going to move bills unless they've got a majority of their own caucus, that doesn't seem like a recipe for getting things done. This seems more like a recipe for gridlock, and certainly I think it's going to be an incredibly long session.
Boy, I hadn't heard that the caucus has to support everything.
Well, I mean, it's been fairly common. That's been the practice for the last few years, but you had a Republican governor. So, you know, these budget negotiations were fairly done in secret. The Republicans would negotiate with the governor and then roll it all out together. Now that you have a Democratic governor and these narrow advantages, it's going to be a lot more difficult to do that. I think that's a goal, that's a victory for transparency. But at the same time, you look at the legislative bodies, both Republican bodies have a new speaker and a new president and had gotten a lot more conservative. So getting a majority of the majority is going to be a lot more difficult this time around.
And 41 of 90 are new. I was struck by that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's almost half.
It was, people need those name tags they have on their blazers and shirts. Let's talk about the aggregate expenditure limit, the spending cap on schools. If that's not fixed by March 1st, schools might have to lay off people, shut down schools. It doesn't look good. What's your sense of what Republicans want to do? Katie Hobbs said, you know, let's get this going. This is urgent. And the Republican response was, what's your hurry?
Playing chicken with children again just doesn't reflect what the voters want to have done. I mean, we know, particularly in rural Arizona, where there aren't charter options and there are fewer private school options, public schools need to be funded. In communities like Havasu City or Window Rock, the largest employers are the school districts. So get it together, pass this lift on the limit, and move on. It certainly hurts our children and the Republican Party, I'd argue, the more that they play chicken.
Governor Hobbs said on the show last week she is making plans for a special session to get this done. Is that where it ends up?
She should. I mean, quite frankly, there are 45 days from Sunday till the end of the limit, according to educationdoomsday.com. And every day between here and then, they're counting it down because it's such an essential issue. It's $1 billion cut to our schools. And this is money that's already allocated. This isn't a tax increase. This isn't a new spending. This is money that the legislature allocated last year, and schools cannot spend unless the limit is lifted. This is an essential crisis, but what we're seeing is Republicans are trying to slow play it, say, what's your hurry? They're going to try to get the most out of it because it's pretty much their only negotiating chip right now. They've got a governor Governor Napolitano already said she should warm up her veto pen.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to happen. And so this is one of the very few chips that they have, so I think they're going to try to play it to their advantage.
She actually has Governor Napolitano's veto stamp, which was used, I don't know, close to 200 times back in the 2000s. EducationDoomsday.com, is that real?
That's a real website. You should check it out.
Go check it out. When we come back, Republican Party Chair Kelly Ward's losing streak is coming to an end. We'll tell you why.